All right, good. Well, welcome everybody to our DORR breakfast. This is wonderful to have such a great turnout. I want to, of course, start by thanking our technician here, Jeff Bissinger, who is here every single time. Thanks, Jeff. I want to thank our new helper for the setting up the breakfast, George Lee. It's been a huge help to me, and I appreciate it so much, George. I can't even tell you. Also here today, we have Mayor Scott Jablow. And Councilwoman Kathy Kinsella, former City Councilman John Martinez. So we'll get started. On your tables here, you should see a door hanger, DORR hanger. Linda can pass some around if anybody doesn't have them. It's our newest piece of collateral, and that is in support of all the many accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration. DORR is going to distribute this very well put together piece done by Janine Reno, our research team. We're going to distribute this door to door starting on December the 2nd. December 9th, December 9th. We're just going to blanket the neighborhoods. If you'd like to volunteer to be part of our neighborhood program or canvassing or lit drop or driver, please contact Diana Christensen, who is and be reached website info at democratstheredrocks.com. is having a program for training for canvassers and neighborhood program people on December the 2nd at the DORR offices in West Sedona. And everybody is welcome, but contact Diana first so we know what kind of, or Lama Hayburn, so we know what kind of a crowd to expect, because it is a somewhat small office. Thank you. Since we met, we had our 1 year out parties. These were parties that were held the weekend of November 3rd, 4th, 5th, the homes of wonderful hosts. We had over 130 people attend at least one of the 10 parties that were happening all around town, as well as in Cornville, as well as in Clarkdale. So it was a wonderfully successful event. We raised money that we can use going into the next election year. It was a terrific event. Katie Hobbs is coming to Sedona. Yay! On December the 10th, there will be a fundraiser for Katie Hobbs, our governor. It will be held at a private home. Once you RSVP, we will send you the address of the home. Obviously, security is paramount, but it's going to be a wonderful event for celebrating her accomplishments. We are celebrating 143 vetoes of horrible legislation. So in honor of those vetoes, we are starting the party, not at 1:30, not at 2 o'clock. We're starting the party at 1:43 p.m. Not a second sooner. Not a second later, 1:43. And as you'll see, one of the donation amounts is $143. I mean, think about it, $1 per veto. That's awesome. So please go to the DORR website. You'll see the information about it. You should have received information if you are on the DORR mailing list because you're a member. If you're not a member, become a member. It's the best bargain in town. $30 individual, $50 for a family, and you can be a DORR member for a year and get all of our wonderful information. If you're interested in circulating petitions, please see Diana Christensen here, and she is our vice president, and she will hook you up with the training and whatever you need to circulate petitions to get abortion rights on the ballot in 2024. Very critical issue. And we have been gathering petitions. If you haven't signed one yet, there are multiples floating around. George has one, Linda has one, so please sign. Because we have a bit of a time constraint, We are going to start our program today. Well, first, let me just tell you, the program, as you know, that what got you here is about local officials and the important role that they play in the functioning of our communities. They serve as our frontline representatives. They are the ones that make decisions that affect our daily lives directly. So we thought we should meet some of these people. We should get to know them. And so we've invited several, as you saw from the flyer. Patty Hansen is here with us. She is the Coconino County Recorder and has been so for a long time. But our first speaker is Sarah Benatar. Sarah is the Coconino County Treasurer. And she is what the Capital Times just gave her an award for, which is one of the 40 rising stars in Arizona. She's amazing. I can't wait to meet her and hear from her. She is at a conference out of state, but she wanted to be here with us today. Her conference begins at 10 o'clock. So I told her I would be quick and introduce her and she can speak, and then we'll continue the rest of the program. So it is my pleasure to introduce Sarah Benatar, Rising Star.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I told Patty to text me if you can't. It's so great to be here. I really do wish I could have been in person, but I'm actually in California having a discussion around access to healthcare for Latinos. So it's a really important topic and I couldn't miss that, but I wanted to share that is why I'm not there with you. I have the honor of serving as the Coconino County Treasurer. I've been in that role now just over, thank you. Okay, that's good. You can hear me just fine. That's always a concern. So, but I've been in this role now just over 9 years. And a lot of times, everyone knows the treasurer's office says this is where you go pay your property taxes. But that is honestly a small piece of the work that we actually do. So we serve as the bank and the chief investment officer, not just for every county department and your justice system within your counties, but also for every taxing district except for cities and towns. That means all your school districts, your fire districts, your hospital districts, water districts, sanitary districts, the list goes on. We are their bank. We are we manage their investment portfolio, and we of course pull out property taxes for every one as well. And so it's a really important role. In Coconino County, we see over $1 billion with a B dollars a year. Our investment portfolio is right now close to $400 million, which is a lot that we are investing and trusted with. And so it's really important, of course, that fiscal responsibility. The number one priority for me is safety first, then liquidity, then yield. So of course, first we have to make sure our taxpayer dollars are safe and accounted for. Then we need to make sure we have enough money on hand to meet the demands of our districts. I live in cash. So whether or not a district has a budget to pay a bill, at the end of the day, it's do you have the cash today to pay the bill? And so just like any other bank, and so that liquidity is really important. And the third piece of it is yield. We want to make sure that we are earning a positive rate of return, but we don't want to sacrifice the safety of public money, and we don't want to sacrifice the cash demands for our districts. And so I say that, I lay it out because what we're seeing nationally, and we've unfortunately seen very much so here in Arizona, is this attack on public money. And the Republicans are actually trying to control who we can invest in, what we can invest in, who we can do business with, and using it in a way where it's anti-free market. It takes away our local control, and it's essentially pushing their values forward. For example, they want us to not bank with anyone who discriminates against the firearm industry, meaning if they deny a loan, deny services. Whoa. Yep. They don't want us to do business with them. And then it goes all the way down into who I can invest in. There was a bill, for example, that said we as county treasurers would not have been able to invest with any company that either gives money or does or donates, gives grants to, has a matching program to any organization that provides sex education from K through 12 or provides abortions for anyone under 18. So that's a big thing of what I also have really been focusing on in the last 2 years is what's called this anti-ESG. So environmental, social governance bills and policies that are going through. I personally have ESG written into our investment policies. I think it's really important to look at the long-term risk. So when I talk about safety for public money, I shouldn't be thinking about, oh, is the money safe for the next quarter? I should be thinking about, is the money safe for the next 5 to 10 years? If I'm going to do business with someone, if I'm going to invest in them, if I'm going to put our taxpayer money there, I need to be looking at all the factors. Are they taking care of their employees? Are their employees happy? Do they have a lot of lawsuits? How is their governance working? Are they addressing climate issues? Because if those things aren't performing well, the reality is that business going to be around in the long term? Is this investment today risky because I'm not looking at the big picture of an organization? And that also carries into how we do our liquidity management. So pretty unique in Coconino is I have the last couple years incorporated climate issues into our cash flow forecast. So I do a cash flow forecast, not just for the county, but for all of our districts to really help them understand this is what your cash is. So that way they're not having to borrow money. And of course that, when you borrow money, you take on more debt and it hurts the taxpayers in the long run. And so it's really having a good understanding, but that means taking climate and other similar risk into account. As a result, when we had the big fires and floods, we had the cash on hand to support our districts. We were able to give them because we had the cash available. I didn't have to sell anything at a loss. So, hopefully it's okay. I just got a little pop-up that said it was unstable for a second. Sorry. But that's just kind of in a nutshell what we do and why it's important. Again, everyone sees us as this is where I go pay your property taxes. And that is a big and very important thing that we do. Those constituent services, working payment plans for those who need it, getting the word out on assistance programs, really trying to explain to our constituents, this is what your tax bill looks like, offering those services throughout the county. Very, very important work as well. But I always try and when I get the opportunity to talk about the back end, which is really what we do, it's the bulk of the work that we do is really the financial management. And so just wanted the opportunity to share that with you. And then wanted to, since I can't stay on, I don't know if there's a chance for anyone to ask questions, but I wanted to make sure there was enough time for that as well.
There is time. Well, if you have the time, we have the time.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Or Shelley?
Holly.
Oh, Holly's got one. Yeah.
Hi there. I'm the vice mayor of Sedona. We recently considered ESG principles for our investment policies, and we have an investment company, organization that we just hired. And it was so complicated and confusing during the presentation about what standards you use, how you quantify, how you qualify these companies that we put it on hold. So I'm wondering if there's information that you can share with us offline that would help us and how you're making these decisions.
Absolutely. I would love to. I will put my contact info in the chat. It'll be my cell phone, and I'll put my personal and my work email. So you have both. But so what we did was I incorporated into our investment policy. So it's actually under our risk analysis, which is our top priority when we're considering any positions. And then what I actually do is so I manage our investment portfolio in-house. It's 100% managed in-house. So anytime I look at a bond, I actually request, there's a website called Ethos ESG. I personally like that the best. I think it does a better job than even Bloomberg, personally, in terms of their ESG analysis. And so I require an A or B rating on Ethos ESG for purchasing. And that really breaks down like how they're rated in every category. It is very, very detailed. And it's they have like a paid subscription, but I only use the free one, and the free one is extremely detailed. But I would be happy to have a more detailed conversation with you offline, and I'll make sure to put the contact info in the chat.
Thanks. And Shelley, can you send it to me? Because I'm not online.
Yeah, Holly, I will. I'll put all the information in the email that I send out. Sarah, is it okay to share your contact information with everybody?
Absolutely. You can
Okay.
share it with everyone. Yep.
Yeah, so Holly, when the email with the link to the YouTube comes out, I'll put it in there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Shelley, are there any questions online?
No, there are not.
Okay, anybody else here have any more questions for Sarah? Patty?
Sarah, I have to do a call out to you. You're not only leading the fight against this at the state level, you're doing it at the national level. And can you just mention, a couple months ago, you testified in Washington, D.C. on the anti-ESG movement?
Yeah, thank you, Patty. So earlier this year in July, I was asked on behalf of Congresswoman Maxine Waters to be the expert witness for the Democrats on an ESG hearing that was happening. So I, of course, went. It was myself and a bunch of bank regulators. It was very intense. If anyone's ever done that, it is a very stressful experience, but the hearing was about ESG. So it was an opportunity for me to share what is happening and the harms that the anti-ESG movement is having on local government. So I was there speaking on behalf on at all levels of government for all 50 states as a local expert in this area. And you look at states like Texas and Florida, Indiana, who have like adopted these policies. And we're talking about hundreds of millions up to, in some cases, they're estimating it's going to cost billions of dollars to taxpayers because they're implementing these policies. Because when you go anti-free market, costs go up. And that's really what this is they want to reduce who we do business with, and they're trying to expand it. They're, of course, targeting financial institutions first, because of course that's where the money is. But this starts to have ripple effects into contracts, for example, for health insurance. So if we can't do business with a company that has a DEI policy, who are we going to get our health insurance from at all levels of government? Which, if you think about it, local governments, when you add us all together, state all the way down, that's a lot of individuals it impacts, and it's a lot of money. And it also impacts retirement funds and pension funds. So we're talking about teachers, our law enforcement officials, their retirement funds as well across the country. So being able to be at the forefront of this, I was essentially the first local official at any level who came out opposing this legislation 2.5 years ago. And so it really put us in a position, and I will say I am very grateful to my Democrat, but my Republican colleagues in Arizona, because we came out as an association opposing this, and 14 of the 15 county treasurers actually wrote an open letter to members of our state legislature opposing these types of legislation and saying why they're so bad and dangerous, which again is hasn't happened in other states. So it really has been, I understand that it needs to be a bipartisan coalition standing up to this. And so, you know, my argument has been with Republicans, look, I am not here to defend ESG to you. I am here to say we should not be anti-free market. I am here to say that decision on ESG should be held at a local level by the elected official who was elected by their people to make that decision. And that seems to have been gone over well. And so, yeah, you know, I go into rooms, I get called woke. If anyone ever wants to see the congressional hearing, I'm happy to share it, and can even share you the link just to read my written testimony. It was, you know, you get called a lot of things, but at the end of the day, when you really stick to the business model and you say, this is why this is bad, it's hard for them to continue down that fight. And so I think, you know, sticking to it, at one point, it's, we've been fortunate, but the fight's just starting, in my opinion. And we're seeing there's just more and more being introduced across the country and even on a national level.
Yeah. Go on.
I'm sorry, help me, I need to catch up here. What is ESG? And what is it that they're trying to do?
So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. It is essentially a way to evaluate, if you're a company, evaluate your performance. And as investment officials, a way for us to evaluate an investment decision. So it's really looking at long-term. So in the environmental factors, how are they addressing climate change, water issues, etc. Social really has to do with how they're interacting and taking care of their employees, and also just community as a whole. So for example, are they pro-union? Are they providing resources? Some states where they can't actually access abortion, are they actually providing resources for their employees to go across state lines and covering that, for example? So that falls under social. And governance is honestly just good governance, right? Like, you know, are they being transparent and honest with shareholders? Are they being open and honest, honestly, with the public? And then, you know, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion policies kind of fall under the social aspect, and the G, the good governance aspect. And so what's happening is Republicans are saying that ESG is bad. And so since they can't tell businesses what policies they can and cannot adopt, what they're doing is they are introducing legislation at a state, and they're attempting to at the federal level, where it says that companies essentially can't, if you adopt these policies, you can't do business with government. If you adopt these policies, government can't invest in you. So it's them trying to control where we are investing our taxpayer dollars. So for treasurers, it's our investment portfolios for all of our taxing districts. At the state level, it's actually your retirement accounts for your public officials. And then it's also controlling our contracts. So who I can bank with, who we can at the county can get our health insurance with, it's rippling down into everything. So that is what they're trying to do, is they can't tell a business what policies they can adopt. They can say, well, if you have this type of policy, we're not going to allow you to do business with governments at any level.
Wow. Scary. It's pretty scary.
It is. So when you actually put it out there, but it's not very well known what ESG is. So if you start to look though at like right-wing, you know, right-leaning social media, ESG is a very trending acronym. And so, but, you know, for most everyday people, what is ESG? And that's a question I get a lot of, and it's a great question. And so, you know, it's education, but it's also for those of us who are in there, it's not being scared, quite honestly, to take a stand and speak out. And so for me, that's my big thing is, I was elected to take care of public money. And if I can't consider all aspects of risk, then I'm not doing a good job. And so for me, it's ESG is a tool in my toolbox. Why are you removing my tools to be successful? I don't know if I'll need this, but that should be my determination if I need this tool today, and if I want to use it. And so forcing it to take everything out is just very, very dangerous. And so that's a big, again, what do your local treasurers do? This is a big piece of it. And so again, a lot of like, what's the difference between a Democrat and Republican treasurer? This right here. So being, you know, taking a stand, not quite honestly not caring what your colleagues may call you, really trying to push this, because when you look at those other states that haven't passed, you know, I talking to Democratic colleagues, they didn't speak out. They didn't say anything. And now they have to implement these, you know, honestly, really bad pieces of law that are resulting in increased costs, or in some cases, not having anyone qualify to provide them with services. And then it's a disaster. It's just a nightmare. So.
Has there been ESG legislation in Arizona the last session?
So many. So it has been so the first bills were dropped in the 2022 session. The big one that got picked up was the firearm anti-discrimination bill, which was you can't discriminate against the firearm industry. Bloomberg did an article on it, and I can share that later as well. And then this year, though, there was a lot more. Jake Hoffman probably dropped the most bills, and I mean, it was the gamut. So, you know, everything from like every bad idea in anti-ESG was introduced in Arizona. So over a dozen bills were introduced. A few made it to Governor Hobbs's desk. She, of course, vetoed him, thankfully. And in terms, you know, and then there was ones that thankfully didn't, you know, make it out of committee or didn't make it, but the ones that did pass, both chambers thankfully were vetoed by Governor Hobbs. But that's obviously a very big concern of us. Is just, yes, we have Governor Hobbs and we love her and we're happy she's there, but we still have to keep fighting because, you know, we can't put our guard down. It's very complicated. The wording, you need to know where you need to look at for it. And so they're getting very sneaky and very creative.
Well, this sounds like a big challenge to our free enterprise system if you have the government really, really scary. Thank you for letting us know about this.
Yeah. Thank you for the time to share it. And thank you, Patty, for bringing it up.
Great, thank you. Thank you for carving out the time to be with us today here, Sarah. We appreciate it very much. This was terrific. Now we need to be alert to this when it's time for requests to speak. And we can vote against things like this, and we're aware of them. So this is a huge help and a great example of the 143 vetoes that were so critical to this session. So thank you, Sarah, very much, and enjoy your conference.
Thank you.
Okay. We now are going to have something that is new for our breakfast. It's called Candidates Corner, because as we go into next year, there are a lot of candidates for offices that some are big, some are small, but we need to educate ourselves about them. And that's why we're having this program today. What does the county treasurer do? What does the state attorney do? Those kinds of things. So what we want to do is do these candidate corners, and each breakfast we will have 1 or 2 candidates for local offices, either in Coconino or Yavapai County, just so for 5-6 minutes, just so that you can meet them, get to know them, and ask any questions that you have about the jobs and about them. So our first candidates corner today, our introductory person is Dr. Bernadine Lewis. She is, come on up. She is director of the School of Business at NAU, the Walter Frank why you should take your notes up when you speaking. Undergraduate programs at the W.A. Frank School of College of Business at NAU. I'm not going to tell you too much more about her because that is the job that she's going to be doing this morning, but she's a good friend and she brought with her her good friend and our good friend, Carl Evans. Flagstaff, and just a dear person, and we all love you, Carl, and thank you for bringing her along. All right, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you so much.
Better standing.
Babe, you think so?
Shelley, can you, is she okay standing or sitting?
She's fine either way.
Okay.
Can we have a chat? So may I sit?
Sure.
I think this, you'll put me on the hot seat today. And good day, beloved community. How are you?
Great.
Thank you for the warm introduction. I am Bernadine Lewis, and in honor of from whence I came, from whence I come, I'm Lewis from Georgia, who grew up in a household led by a Lewis. That household was frequented by a king who was the drum major for peace, and also frequented by another Lewis who was always looking for good trouble. Sometimes good trouble around him. So I lead with that because these were three men who influenced my life, who were in my household, who dedicated their lives to the work of equity and equality for all, and the right to vote. And so just sharing a bit of my background, coming from the South, Jim Crow South, Savannah, Georgia, whom Dr. King considered Savannah to probably be one of the most desegregated cities in Savannah or in Georgia. He was amazed by the fact that people of African descent were able to walk, go to the beach and swim without being run away or having to go to a separate part. And he was amazed by that. So Savannah became his getaway. And my childhood home would become a place where he could come and plot and scheme, but also, also just to kind of relax. If you're wondering why I answered the call, and I considered this to be a calling, it was quite easy. It wasn't difficult to make the decision to do this. I considered this a moral obligation. In the South, the right to vote in the skin that I'm in, it is a rite of passage. And we all can relate, and we know the history of the lives that were lost or damaged just for that right to vote. And it dawned on me just the other evening, I was sharing with Dr. Coral, when I realized I am the first generation in my family who gained the right to vote without having to go through literacy tests or other methods which were created to prevent people like me from voting. And so I can sit before you today, stand before you, being very solid and confident on why not being able to defend, why not stepping up to be able to do this work. We give honor to Ms. Hansen, who for 12 years has untirelessly done a monumental job in ensuring that Coconino County has had, I'd like to say, stress-free and drama-free elections. And because of her work, we have been recognized by the state for that. And this is all due to Ms. Hansen's work and her leadership and her team. And so in running for this position, I say that we're not seeking to change anything. I'd like to say that we only want to enhance. And while that word is being used, I use that because we don't really need to change anything, but the enhancement comes from the current work that I do at a university and the relationships that I have with our community colleges. It would be the opportune situation to be able to increase our young voter registration and to create, there's something that I do, I call it edutainment, because this is what our young people like. They want to be entertained and they learn through entertainment. And so my work at NAU involves training young minds, and I've had to find ways to keep them engaged. And so in doing this work, it would easily transfer into working with our broader higher education institutions to get these students not only registered to vote, but to follow through with actually showing up at the polls on election day, because we have them just at NAU 9 to 10 months out of the year. They're our residents. We need them to understand, and I like to say overstand, the importance of their civic responsibility. And that's a big part of professionalism. So that is why I'm also bringing over 25 years of not only higher ed work, but corporate, and not only as a professional or teacher of business, but also administration wise. So that professionalism, that keeping records, that the ethics, that is a big part of the work that I do in teaching students. And so that is what I know that I am able to bring into this position. I think if you want to ask
Do you
any
have a
questions.
website?
Yes, not fully developed, will be in the next few days, but Lewis for recorder at .org, sorry, because there's emails and there are also the website to remember, and I can leave that with everyone today.
Okay, we will put that on our website, the DORR website.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so
All right.
much.
Yeah, Ellen, if you could share that email with me, or I don't know, it was a website or an email, I couldn't get it all, so.
What was that again?
Email.
lewisforreporter.org.
Yes.
.org. And is it FOR or the number 4?
The number 4,
The number
thank you,
4.
that's something to clarify, the
Good.
number 4.
Yes.
Okay,
I
I
will
didn't.
share that with our mailing list.
Oh, I just want to say, this is not the first time we've seen Bernadine in Sedona. She's come and
Yes.
marched with us
Yeah.
on various occasions. And so thank you, and we're happy that you're decided to take this plunge into elected office.
Thank you, and I consider it to be an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Dr. Lewis is running for the position of Coconino County Recorder. We will hear more about what that entails in a little while, because our current Coconino County Recorder, Patty Hansen, is sitting here. So she will give us an insight into that world. First, our second person in the candidates corner is Gary Pearlmutter. Gary, do you want to come up? Gary has been a lawyer for 30 some years. and has decided that he would like to become a run for the elected office of county attorney in Coconino County. So he was brought to us by our friend Mick Jordahl, who made the introduction, and welcome. We're happy to hear from you. And in your remarks, give us a little bit of insight into what kinds of things the county attorney does.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
That's always a question that I have. Again, I'm Gary Pearlmutter. And I've been in northern Arizona. I first started, arrived here back in 1980. And then went down to Tucson, and I worked for the National Park Service, and then I went to law school. So being a lawyer is my second career. I feel kind of honored, quite honestly, to be sharing the pulpit today with Patty, Bernadine, Coral being here, and Sarah. I consider them all friends. I've known them for years. And I haven't mentioned this to Bernadine, but my wife's middle name, it's her middle name, but her name was Lewis too. I don't know if you and her have talked about that, but anyway. Mick was on the board of directors of a nonprofit that I have. I was a co-founder of Southwest Center for Equal Justice. So I tell you, I'm a lifelong Democrat. The county attorney position. The county attorney is primarily the chief prosecutor for Coconino County for all felonies. And any misdemeanor offenses, those are the lower level crimes that occur in the county outside of any incorporated cities. So Sedona has its own city court. I've appeared in it. And it handles your more minor offenses like shoplifting or illegal camping, those kinds of things. It's murder, violent crimes, rape, burglaries, car theft. Those are handled by your county attorney. Here in Sedona, it's split between Yavapai and Coconino County. Most of it being, quite frankly, is in Yavapai County. But the county attorney also has some other jobs, and that is they're also they're the primary legal advisor to the executive and the board of supervisors. So, when it comes to zoning, when it comes to water law and those kinds of issues, when it comes to contract and employment issues, those are all handled, and legal advice is given to the county manager, executive team, county directors, and the board of supervisors. There's always an attorney that sits in at all the county board meetings and they can provide legal advice. So that's the primary job. In our county, there's 20 attorneys. There's ironically 40 support staff, which is a lot. Then about 5 of those attorneys, the civil division, 15 of the criminal division. So we give you an idea of where the emphasis is. So what I would tell you is I have a well-balanced background in criminal justice, public law, and public administration. I've been basically a public employee or now working with a nonprofit. That's been since I graduated college. I've been in public one way or another. I've worked for the public, whether it be for the federal government, to local government, Coconino County. I spent 10 years in federal law enforcement, what I did with the national parks. So I was at Station in Zion National Park, Grand Canyon National Park, and Saguaro National Park. That's what I did. And I've arrested people, as I say, I've arrested people for murder and I've represented people for murder. It's a unique, it's kind of unique to a great extent. I've arrested people for domestic violence, represented people for domestic violence. I've seen child abuse, and I've represented people for child abuse. So I was involved in removing a child from a colonel who had left their kid in their car at Grand Canyon, and they went out for hours and left their baby in the car. So I've seen that, and then I've represented parents in the child welfare system, for example. So again, I think I bring a balanced approach because of that kind of background. I spent 14 years as the director of one of the county's public defender offices called the Legal Defender, the Alternative Public Defender. As part of that, I oversaw two things I oversaw primarily. One was the mental health, part of the mental health civil commitment system, what we call Title 36s, where people, if they're dating themselves, others, or they're sort of permanently, or the law says, mental defect, they say. And basically people that sometimes can't take care of themselves, or suffering from schizophrenia, or they're having psychotic episodes, they would be placed into and can be taken to a behavioral health unit, either at the hospital or in our guidance center up in Flagstaff. So those I hope to oversee that system. And I also oversaw criminal defense contracts. So when I retired from that office here a few years ago, I think there are a total of 12 murders that were pending in Coconino County, which was pretty astounding, given usually over the years it might be 0 or 1 or 2, but for a few years it was quite a high number. And I'd oversee hiring attorneys for that, because it couldn't always be handled within the legal defender or the public defender's office. County attorney can, if there are 4 people arrested for that one murder, the county attorney can prosecute all 4, but the public defender can only represent 1, the legal defender can only represent 1. And typically we'd have to go to Phoenix, and those are expensive cases. So I helped oversee that. What I would tell you is I'm solution oriented. I helped to start our Veterans Court, and I'm the one who brought it to our county. We became, I would give you as an example of the success of that court when you had a SWAT team having to be called because a veteran was unfortunately holding his wife and daughter hostage. He let them out. He eventually surrendered. He was arrested without any violence up in Doney Park in North Flagstaff. But what's interesting is, en route to the jail, the SWAT officers are telling him about the Veterans Court. They're saying, make sure you talk to your lawyer about the Veterans Court, because you need to get into the Veterans Court. That, I thought, I use that because that's the definition of success. It really is, in my view. One of the other things I think I want to just bring to your attention is, and I can't talk about it all. I could. I appreciate that. But I would tell you, Coconino County has the second highest arrest incarceration rate in the state per capita. Second highest. If you did away with the Western Agency of the Navajo Nation, it's probably the highest. Because those about 20,000 people that live on the Western Agency, is that number about right? About 25,000, Patty? Is that 20 or 20?
I heard like 60,000 in the tribe, so I don't
Well,
know.
Oh, no, there's a lot more in the tribe,
Yeah.
but in the Western Agency,
Yeah.
I think there's 333,000 or so living up in the Navajo Nation overall, but the Western Agency is not, that's this 3/8, they divide it up into Eastern, Central, and Western Agency. Anyway, if you remove that, we're probably the highest. Arizona itself has the 8th highest imprisonment rate in the world per capita. 8th highest in the world. That's per capita. So that's, whether that's 100 per 10,000 or whatever, but that's what that per capita is. So and the US is the, depending who you talk to, second or first per capita in terms of incarceration. So it raises a lot of questions in terms of who you're incarcerating, who we should be incarcerating, who we shouldn't be, what are our approaches, the traditional justification for prosecution is, well, we're going to deter that. We're going to deter people from their criminal behaviors. Well, that doesn't work when you have folks that are suffering from addiction issues or mental health. And you go talk to the commander of the jail, he's going to tell you 20 to 40% of people in there are suffering from mental illness. Now, not necessarily schizophrenia. They're there, but they're not a lot of those. Bipolar, that's a big one. Bipolar often coexist with other kinds of addictions to drug co-occurring disorders. So methamphetamine is big. So here's the other thing I would tell you. I can go on and on about those things, but abortion rights. I support the governor in that regards, and I support her order she issued. I think it was, where she ordered Chris Mays to handle all abortion cases related to abortion, with civil rights around abortion. I support that because I think it needs a centralized approach. I'll tell you, 12 out of the 15 county attorneys opposed that, including our county attorney here, and including Democratic county attorneys. But that I will tell you, I pledge not only not to prosecute a woman for exercising her right to an abortion, but also, and I heard quite frankly, I'm going to tell you, I heard my opponent say he also would say that, but it's more than that. We're not going to prosecute not only the woman, but the providers, those to help and assist a parent. We've seen parents prosecuted now in Oklahoma and Indiana or Ohio. I think, for that to me is outrageous. So the other thing, the dovetail on what Patty and what Bernadine has already addressed is the right, and I think we need to talk about it now in our current state of our country, and that is we need the right to vote. At some levels, I've talked to some of my friends that I consider moderate Republicans. I say this election's about preserving democracy. Preserving democracy. If you can't support a person's right to vote, we're in trouble. And versus authoritarianism, in my so if anybody interferes with a person's right to vote, I would prosecute that. That is just a fundamental civil right. It's fundamental to our democracy. I let you know that. So I wanted to make sure I express some. Now I don't, as we've heard, we haven't seen those problems occur in Coconino County, but we've heard talk of them, and we've seen challenges to elections here in Arizona in some big ways. So it's out there. And it's just a matter of time before something creeps up here to northern Arizona. So I want to let you know I pledge to treat everybody with dignity, respect, and to listen to their concerns. That's who I am. That's who I've been my whole life. My father was in politics. He ran for state representative, teacher, school administrator. and to, right, he's my idol too, to a great extent. So, that's who I am. And I hope, I look for your support, especially if you're in Coconino County. I have my, petitions here. If you're in Coconino County, please come see me, or maybe I can find you and have you sign. Thank you very much. Oh, Pearl, did you get a picture of me? Could you get a grab?
I didn't, but I can't.
Okay.
Need the selfies, right?
Pearl's good at this, if you.
He's good at everything.
Facebook fan.
As far as we can tell. All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Gary. Again, he's running for county attorney in Coconino County. Question?
Yes, please.
A little bit confused when people talk about yellow and red flag.
Oh,
Can you tell me what the differences on that? And obviously, whether it's a mental issue, we definitely need something.
Gary, come up here to answer that so the people at home can see.
You know, I'm gonna tell you that, that question came to my mind because what just happened here, last month in Maine. So Maine has a yellow flag law. Other states generally have red flag laws, to the extent that states have red flag laws. I'm gonna try to answer your question. I read it, and ironically, I'm not remembering the absolute difference. I think I now I'm talking about. Basically, red flag laws allow anybody who's an interested party to file a petition with a court to have a weapon removed from a person that they believe is a threat to public safety or to a family. Yellow flag only allows the police, basically, to do it. It's very, very limited. That's what happened in Maine. Because Maine's is an interesting state. It's a very interesting state. I grew up in New England. So, it's in a lot of ways, a lot of people don't realize it's the most rural, it's more rural than Western states, northern Maine. More rural. So, simply put, that's the difference. That answer your question?
Well, I guess we're saying with the yellow, the police can take the guns away, but in red, the court has to determine that.
The police have to, the police then have to go to the court and file a petition too with the court. But they're the only ones that have the authority to do that.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Hi, thanks for speaking today.
Thank you.
Maybe I missed it, but just bear with me if I did. You're talking about the military, the military.
The Veterans Court, yes.
Veterans. What about a mental health court?
We have a mental health court too.
Can you just address that? What does, what's going on with that? What the process is and how it's helping people to keep them out of jail?
A mental health court is where folks that have a diagnosed DSM, that's the technical psychologists and psychiatrists regarding that.
Statistical manual.
Yes. Right. Yes, diagnostic statistical manual. I think we're on our 6th or 7th one.
It might be 6 now.
Manual. People that have a diagnosis from a psychologist or psychiatrist can be in these courts. There are courts that are overseen by a judge. There's usually caseworkers or that work with a behavioral health, mental health agency that is also assigned to the court. And there's a prosecutor and a defense attorney that's assigned to the court. Usually one prosecutor that prosecutor might have other cases, but there's just one. There's one who's designated to be that prosecutor in the court, and one defense attorney that's representing. So they all know each other. They have case meetings usually before the court goes into session, where they talk about what the status is of each of the folks that are going to be referred to the court and are being overseen by the court. So it's sort of almost like a more intensive form of probation but it's using the power of the court and the authority of the court to, and help make the folks that are, that are mentally ill healthier. And they can impose sanctions. Those sanctions could be, you now have a curfew again. It could be that they're going to lock them up in jail. That's more prominent in drug courts than it is in mental health courts, but they could use that sanction, or they could put them in jail till they can find a bed for them back in a behavioral health facility. Does that answer your
I mean, I knew the answer. I just want other people to know, but I wasn't sure what Coconino County did.
Coconino County has a mental health court basically for misdemeanors. And I will tell you, there's good things of these courts, drug courts, mental health courts, and drug courts all arose out of the late 80s and the 90s, where we got tough on crime. And we started imposing, 3 strikes you're out type statutes. This was the first reaction to that, saying we went too far. But I would tell you, one of the problems that exists is there's a lot of these people that, in the 70s and 80s. In the 70s, I was in high school, and I would go into the state hospitals in Massachusetts before there's a lot of deinstitutionalization. I was a volunteer that would go in there. There's a group of us students who would go in there. And when we deinstitutionalized, there's a really pretty decent community behavioral health system. But those are relative to today.
Right.
Relative to today.
That's why we say not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. Not anymore. Because the mentally ill, quite frankly, are some of the most disenfranchised folks in our society. So, and so anyway.
All right, thank you so
Sure.
much. I appreciate it.
See, I see enthusiasm for these subjects. It needs to be treated, quite frankly, as a public health model. And we need to be looking more toward a public health model for addressing some of our social ills versus the criminal justice. There's a place for criminal justice. That's with violent crimes.
Another topic, another
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you so much. Thank you. Again, Gary Pearlmutter, who's running for county attorney in Coconino County. Next, we have another shining star, Patty Hansen, who is retiring as Coconino County Recorder after how many years?
I'm not running for reelection.
You're not running for re-election.
Yeah.
Okay. She has been on the front lines of election integrity, along with many others like her in her position throughout the state. We know that Leslie Hoffman, who was the recorder in Yavapai County, and her elections director, Lynn Constable, both felt that they had to leave their positions because they felt it wasn't safe. So it has been a rough several years for people in this position. And our hats are off to you, our gratitude with you. We appreciate all you've done to keep things running as smoothly as Dr. Lewis was talking about. So thank you for all you do. Come tell us a little bit more about what the position entails and what you've been through. After that, we will have Randy Hawley, who is the superintendent for Sedona Oak Creek District, Unified District School System. All right, thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that part of the introduction, and thank you, George, for contacting me to come speak to you, and thank you for the DORR for all you do. As Gary mentioned, democracy is on the line. It really is this year. I cannot stress that more. And our elections have been under attack since the Shelby v. Holder decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, which struck down the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act. And the Voting Rights Act, as an election official, that people would complain, Oh, that was so much work. We had to justify every little thing we did. It was really good because discrimination could happen intentionally or unintentionally. So if we had to move a polling place, we had a third group of people out there looking at it, the Department of Justice saying, hey, where you're moving that, I think it's going to have a discriminatory effect. And when you saw Shelby decision come out, it opened the floodgates for states, mostly in the South, but not totally, just in the South, to start passing discriminatory voter suppression laws. And unfortunately, Arizona is ground zero for a lot of the efforts that are trying to be done. And thank goodness, a lot of those 143 vetoes that Governor Hobbs did stop some terrible legislation. So just to give you a little background about myself, I've been doing election administration for 36 years. Oh, wow. I know, you think I started in kindergarten. No, but in all seriousness, I started in Nebraska and then went from Nebraska to Minnesota. Went to Minnesota because I'm a firm believer in election day voter registration. I saw it worked. I implemented it there. There was not fraud going on. And I wanted to experience that. Well, when I was there, there was a tragic accident right before an election in 2002. US Senator Paul Wellstone died in a plane crash.
Yes.
And I became very disillusioned with how Minnesota handled that. They decided to put another candidate in. Votes had already been cast for Senator Wellstone, and if you wanted to get your ballot back, you had to contact the election office and vote a new one, and I thought it was a mess. So I decided that I wanted to look at moving somewhere else, and I had never worked in a state under the Voting Rights Act. And Arizona had an opening for an election director. And so in 2003, I moved here and became the election director for Coconino County, working for Candy Owens. Some of you may have known her and remember her. And then when Candy decided not to run for re-election, I decided to run in 2012. So I've been in office for 11 years now. And the 36 years that I've been here, the first part of my career, I was able to implement things that helped, I thought, open up voting. And since 2000, I think it was 6, Prop 200, I've seen it in this state, laws coming into effect that's trying to keep people from voting. So when you cannot win on your issues and your policies, what do? They want to manipulate the system to keep those who are not, they believe are not going to vote their way from voting. So a lot of my time now is spent fighting legislative laws, similar to what our treasurer, Sarah Benatar, is doing. And also having to go to court, being in court. I recently had to do a 7-hour deposition for the Mi Familia lawsuit, which is trying to stop 2 bills that were passed at the end of Governor Ducey's administration, basically adding additional requirements for proof of citizenship, proof of residence. I mean, we have no evidence that these crimes or fraud is happening. So the only conclusion you can come to is it's being done to stop groups of people. And these are going to hurt young people a lot. And guess what? The polls and studies are showing young people are trending Democratic. So they're also being put in place to keep a lot of our Native American voters, I believe, from being able to cast their vote. So one of the things I've done in the past few years is to try to make voting easier, even though we have these requirements. So on the Navajo Nation, in 2020, we started our mobile voter registration sites and also mobile early voting. So we set up a schedule and we go to different places on the Navajo Nation and the Hopi Reservation to offer voter registration and early voting. Native Americans don't vote as high as the rest of the population by mail. And it makes sense if you're an older Navajo or Hopi voter, we can't mail an interpreter to you. So they like to vote in person, and we do provide language assistance. So that's been very successful. There's a couple of lawsuits going on right here in Yavapai County. They've been filed. One is to block ballot drop boxes.
No.
Yes, and ballot drop boxes are very popular with our voters. We have a large percentage, I think it was 40-some% of our voters in 22 returned their early ballot through drop boxes. So that's another thing they're trying to stop because it's convenient. We don't want voting to be convenient. And I do think there is sometimes a philosophical difference between the two political parties. And I could just see that with my fellow recorders. My Republican counterparts tend to believe if you're not willing to do what's required, maybe you shouldn't be voting. Where Democrats believe, and my belief is, it's a right. We should be making it easy for you to exercise your right, as well as keeping it safe and secure. So that's kind of a debate that's gone on for years. Yeah, Judge.
I mean, one of the things that galls me is the fact that Republicans say, well, it's so easy to vote because almost all of them already have voter identification that fits into the criteria, where a lot of people of color, particularly Native populations, do not. And that is never even addressed.
Well, that's what I've been working long enough. I can remember when the National Voter Registration Act, the NVRA, went into effect. It was passed. It was the first law that President Bill Clinton signed into law as president. But what it did, the supporters of the NVRA, which I was a big one, was that you had to offer either election day voter registration, and the states that did that were exempt from the NVRA. But then the other states had to offer opportunities for registering to vote when you get your driver's license. And then they selected other federal agencies that they felt the people that would not go through motor vehicles would then be able to register, such as WIC. At that time, it was AFDC. I think it's TANF now, food stamps, programs like that. And the goal was to get at least everyone would be given the chance to register. And also the states had to allow mail-in voter registration. Prior to 1993, there were several states in our country where the only place you could register to vote was at the courthouse. And guess what? The courthouse would be open maybe 9 to noon, 1 to 4. So that meant if you worked a job that you couldn't get into the courthouse to, you didn't get registered. So it was to make registration easier, and it did. And I think that was a real positive thing to come about. Now, our state is trying to fight the NVRA requirements, and that created the bifurcated system, which is part of the NVRA said that there was a national voter registration form that everybody in the country needed to use and accept. And that's the federal form. they specified in the act what was required to go on that form. Well, it didn't require proof of citizenship. So in Arizona, we did all the way to the Supreme Court ruled Arizona has to accept the federal form without proof of citizenship, but those registrants can only vote for federal offices. So we have people that are registered to vote through a state form or the state system, and they can vote the entire ballot. We have voters that use the federal form. Now, the NVRA did require, because several states went nuts saying fraud, 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 all these people are going to register to vote by mail, that they're not eligible or they don't even exist. So you have to provide identity, which is last 4 digits of your social security number. If you can't, so if you fill out the form, you give us the last 4 digits, we verify through our state system, you can vote as a federal voter, and you can vote by mail if you want to. If you don't provide that social security number, you're a federal only ID needed voter. So those people cannot vote by mail. The first time they vote, they have to show up in person. Now, I don't think anybody in their right mind would sit down and try to create such a stupid, convoluted system, but that's what we have in Arizona. And from what I've seen, it hurts our college students the most. In fact, on the candidate running as a Republican for the recorder, he introduced legislation. His name's Bob Thorpe. When he was in the legislature, he introduced legislation that said college students shouldn't be allowed to register to vote at school address. They should have to register and vote where their parents live.
Oh.
And Supreme Court decisions have kind of ruled that students are in a transitory state, so they can decide whether they reside at their school or they reside at their home for voting purposes. So, it's just disgusting what they're trying to do.
So my understanding is that the Board of Supervisors decides on the polling places. But I know that in Coconino, you have polling places, and in Yelp we have vote centers. Can you just share a little bit about that?
Okay, yep. Now I will back up. I contracted with the Board of Supervisors when I became recorder, and Candy Owens did, to oversee both election day voting and ballot tabulation, as well as early voting and voter registration. In 2021, I decided to give that back to the Board of Supervisors and not renew that contract. And mainly because I saw that I would probably not be running again, and it just has gotten more and more complicated. Going through the 2020 election with COVID and what happened afterwards, we need more people involved. So made that decision. But we do have vote centers in Coconino County. We don't advertise them as vote centers. Now, I started vote centers, I think we started in 2016. I had a study group that looked at how do we want elections run for the next 10 years in Coconino County. And they recommended transitioning to vote centers. But because we are such a rural area, our county, we decided to do a hybrid. So we had 3 vote centers, 2 in Flagstaff, 1 in Tuba City, just like your vote centers here. And then we had polling place sites. Now, the polling place ones were really a vote center. We didn't advertise it because of the touchscreen voting equipment we have. All ballot styles are on there. And so let's say you showed up.
Explain to everybody the difference of a vote center and a polling place.
Oh, thank you. Okay, good point. Sorry.
Sorry.
A vote center is a location where you can go vote, and it's not assigned a specific location for you for your polling place, your location. You can go to any vote center and vote any ballot, no matter where you're residing and registered to vote. Polling place is you have to go to that specific location because they'll only have ballots for you for where you live. And why vote centers were able to come about was the introduction of electronic poll books. Prior to that, we had paper rosters. If any of you worked in elections prior to that, you may remember those books that you had to sign into. And also ballot on demand printers. Ballot on demand printers prints out your ballot for you. Like for a primary election in Coconino County, we have about 660 ballot styles. And that's because different political parties, different districts, rotation of names. So that's why you couldn't have 660 different ballots at each polling place. But now with a vote center, you can print out the correct one for the voter. Now, I have heard, I don't know this for sure, but I've heard the new election director in Coconino County is looking at going to vote centers. So you can't do vote centers on the reservation. I don't believe you can because we can't make people drive 3 or 4 hours to get to their location to vote. But if you accidentally, let's say you go to the Botaway chapter house to vote and you really are registered in Cameron precinct, which is south of you, you would be given an option of you can vote on the touch screen, which has all the ballot styles. Or you'd have to go to Cameron to get the big paper ballot. So good question. Right. Yeah, ballot on demand printers are quite expensive and you need a pretty good network. We still have in Coconino County, in 2020, I know, we still had 3 locations that didn't get the internet. So our electronic poll books, if you went there, and you weren't registered in that precinct, you'd have to vote a provisional ballot, which just meant your ballot was kept in the envelope so we can verify you hadn't voted more than once. So, but those are things that we've been able to do in Coconino County. Now I should talk about the other hat I wear, property records. The recorder has property records going back to when we were part of Yavapai County. Our books and records in the vault. So that's important information. And one of the things I'm excited about is our county worked with Senator Sinema and was able to get a $1.3 million grant, I think. And so we're getting a big book scanner that we will be scanning all of our records, and we will be putting the records that are on microfilm and microfiche, digitizing them so they'll be available online. And that's something I'm very excited about because why should you have to drive to Coconino County? Drive to Flagstaff to do research on your property if you don't live in Flagstaff. So there's things like that we're doing that I'm excited about. As you can see, I have to tell you, Sarah Benatar is as wonderful as she seems. We are so lucky to have her be our county treasurer. She is truly a rising star. She is one of the brightest people I've ever met. And I say, when I grow up, I want to be like Sarah Benatar. So we're very lucky to have her. In our county, the treasurer, assessor, and the recorder work closely together, especially on the property record side. Though the county treasurer is responsible for keeping voted ballots. So we're lucky in Coconino County. We have a lot of really great constitutional officers, elected officials. Jim Driscoll has won awards also at the national level. Cheryl Mango Paget, who is our superintendent of schools, is just outstanding. She's won state awards. Valerie Wyatt, our clerk of the Superior Court, has been doing a fantastic job. She and all of us, including our assessor and the current county attorney, we've all been served as president of our associations at the state level. So Coconino County, we're proud of what we've been doing. Oh, I need to mention two other things before I forget. The governor's task force. The governor had some suggestions that came out. I was lucky enough to serve on Secretary Fontes's transition team. And one of the suggestions we came up with made it into the governor's task force recommendations. And that's to allow provisional voting across county lines. And in Sedona, it makes sense. If you move from one side of Sedona to the other side of Sedona, and right now, and you can't update your registration on election day and have your ballot count.
Wow.
We have a statewide voter registration system. Why can't, we allow people who maybe have moved, they're currently registered, they moved to a new county. Let them vote a provisional ballot. We go in the state system. Oh, they used to live in Maricopa. I confirm. Yeah, they live in lived and registered in Maricopa. They have not voted in Maricopa County. So why shouldn't their registration be allowed to be updated and allowed to vote? So I think that's a really good one. Another one that came out, and this is an issue that's really been hard, I think, nationwide, which is restoration of felons' voting rights.
Yes.
Yeah.
Currently, how the system works is if you're registered to vote, and you are convicted of a felony, the state runs the list against who's been convicted. Okay, your registration will be canceled. Okay.
That's after your second felony.
No, it's your first. It gets canceled with your first felony.
It's reinstated.
Well, that's a different issue. Yeah.
It's reinstated.
No, I'm talking about the system. Yeah. Yeah. In Arizona. Now, okay, I'm convicted of a felony today. I register to vote tomorrow. It's not going to hit that I'm a felon. So the only people, it's not administered fairly. It's a dumb system, in my opinion. And disenfranchise of felons came about because of Jim Crow in the South. After the Civil War, they didn't have enslaved people to do the work. So what do? We arrest them, put them in prison and then make them work. So that's the history that goes through. There's some states that allow felons to vote. North Dakota, it doesn't even have voter registration. So
I think in Maine, you can vote in prison.
Yeah. But that was one thing that came out. Now, one of our current, because we have a little piece of this district in District 1, Senator Bennett voted no. He was the only no vote on the committee on that, in the governor's task force to vote against allowing what the governor's task force is saying. If you're not incarcerated, you can register and vote. And that to me, at least, is a step in the right direction, because it's obvious if you're in prison or in jail, that you can't. It's a fairer way. And then, as Gary mentioned, right now in Arizona, if you're convicted of one felony, you serve your time, you're off probation, and you've paid your restitution, your voting rights are automatically restored. If you're convicted of 2 or more felonies, you have to go to your sentencing court and ask to have your voting rights restored. And then one crime can involve more than one felony. So in my opinion, only the honest felons are telling us, calling and saying, no, I was convicted of this. Am I eligible to register to vote? So, but that's a whole other issue. But you can see it's been, there's lots of things going on right now in elections. I can happily say I have not experienced what they've experienced in Yavapai in regards to the harassment and threats.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you the same question.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. It's the Republican counties where they're driving out their Republican recorders and election directors. And these are the counties that Trump won. So I don't understand it. It's really, I miss Leslie Hoffman. Leslie Hoffman was a good partner. She was fair. We disagreed on a few things, but not a lot. She wanted people to really be able to register to vote. Lynn Costabile was a great election director. The current recorder, Michelle Burchell, I think is learning. She came in as an election denier and not trusting, but I think she's beginning to see that it's not as easy as she thought, and that people that work in elections. In my 36 years, I've only met one election official that I would not trust and do not believe have any ethics. That's the county recorder in Cochise County. Otherwise, it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. It is, as Bernadine mentioned, it's a calling. I have been lucky to be able to work for 36 years. And when I retire in January of 2025, I will be able to say I worked in a profession that was my passion, and it's been an honor. And I can't think of a profession more rewarding to be in. So in Sedona, you may have noticed the recent election, we did a shared ballot replacement site. And I want to thank the city and the city clerk for being our early voting site on election day. I don't think Yavapai does. They did a replacement site, but I don't think they do early voting at the
They
city
do,
clerk's
but
office.
it's in Cottonwood and Preston.
Yeah. So we will, as long as I'm here, we'll keep that at the city clerk's office for Coconino. I wish we could do the Yavapai too, but I have not been able to win that battle. And also we did the same thing in Ashfork. There was an Ashfork school election, and we shared a replacement site in Ashfork. So
Thank you so much for your service. It's a very impressive. I live in Yavapai County.
mhm.
So what can we voters, besides voting, how can we help you?
Well, get people out to vote. You have a couple colleges, right, in Yavapai County? Young people will register, but they're not getting out to vote.
Really?
At least at NAU, it is so sad. We mail, they register them to vote at NAU. They sign them up for this active, used to be permanent early voting list. We mail out the ballots to them and they never get picked up. Now, part of it is it's snail mail, and I'm surprised a lot of those students never even know they have a PO box. We work with the post office at NAU, and they help us get the PO box because you have to have a mailing address to get your ballot delivered. But keep spreading the word. You know, elections legitimize the government in place.
Yes.
The Nazis had elections, you know, and they weren't fair elections, but they had elections. So even the most authoritative governments will put in place bogus elections to try to give themselves, you know, some kind of legitimacy. So we have got to fight all voter suppression laws. We have to make sure people vote and that we keep our democracy the way it is. I mean, it's scary with what a lot of these people are trying to say they want to do. We had a state senator, I think he's a senator, John Kavanaugh,
Yep.
who actually said on the floor of the legislature, we don't want everyone to vote. At least he was honest. You know, we do want everyone to vote when our democracy is strong, when everyone's voice is heard. I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Randy Hawley, it looks like you're not on Zoom anymore. I apologize. We were supposed to. No, that's okay.
I'm on Zoom.
Oh, you are on Zoom. Okay.
Yes.
Randy, we're gonna have to postpone your appearance. I apologize sincerely, but it looks like we've hit our time limit and I want to give you your fair amount of time. So we will be in touch with you about a different time. Okay, so sorry.
All right.
Everybody else, thank you so much. It was a good program. I'm sorry we ran a little bit over. Kathy?
Just want to point out that there are several candidates in the room that are collecting petition signatures in order to be able to run. If anybody hasn't signed the petition yet, please make sure you see the various candidates that are running.
So we live in the city of Sedona or the county of Coconino.
Right.
Come sign.
Right, and one more thing. Annual meeting, the Democrats of the Red Rocks annual meeting is January the 21st. It will be at St. Andrew's Church and it will be a potluck supper. The person who is in charge of this is our own wonderful Margaret Connery. We have Jonathan Nez, who is challenging Eli Crane, who will be the speaker. And we think that Congressman Greg Stanton will also be with us that night. So it'll be a fun evening. And I urge you all to put that on your calendar now. Sunday night, January 21st, 5 to 7. Yeah, 5 to 7. All right, thank you.